Welcome to TheRiff. Today on TheRiff, Jeremy and Justin sit down to talk about JXP groups and what they learned from leading one. Naturally, they also talk about Zumba and crab walks. We hope today is helpful. Thanks for listening.
Hello, Riff listeners. Happy day to you. I almost said happy Monday because that's when we release the podcast. But then it dawns on me that not everyone's as excited and sets their alarm like I am.
No. Some are Wednesday listeners.
Yeah, hump day.
Even
that's a day to listen.
Right. Even Thursday. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I also didn't want to bring it up. I keep thinking that it's not going to happen again, but the day that we're filming this, it's freezing again. I think the last 10 episodes we've talked about it.
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to get warm.
My goodness.
I'm so ready.
And I know this is dropping in, later May, but as we're recording this, we're having an unseasonably cold snap.
I think we say that every time.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
It might be seasonable.
Maybe it's a Wednesday thing because we film these on Wednesdays.
Oh, yeah.
Does the weather work like that? Is it cyclical like that?
So.
Yeah, Wednesdays are colder than most.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. But I'm glad that you're with us today listening. Hey, Justin, we're going to talk about something that you and I both just walked through in different ways and different locations, but we just got done leading JXP groups.
So true.
So JXP, tell us a little bit about what JXP is for those who might have, they're new to the link and maybe they don't know.
Okay. It's a small group setting.
Yep.
Right. So that means a couple people, 5, 6, 7, 8, and they're walking through a piece of the Bible. So what we chose Luke to walk through. You did a series and walked through a lot of Luke and just the Jesus journey. And we kind of paired that together with this whole process of walking through spiritual disciplines and learning the way of Jesus as we all walk through the book of Luke together. So that's kind of in a nutshell what it was, what it is. We'll continue to do those groups. We'll have a couple more in the fall. It might be Luke. It might be Acts. It might be something crazy.
Song of Solomon. There's a lot of great options out there. So the idea of just open up scripture and be able to talk about it, process it together. And then every week there seemed to be, or most weeks at least, there was a homework assignment, like an exercise to do. Sometimes our group, we did ours, a couple times we did it in our session. So I want to kind of walk through some of those. I want to walk through a little bit about what that journey was, and then talk about a couple of these exercises that were meaningful and encourage those who are listening, because we have a lot of people who are listening who they weren't part of a JXP. This might be helpful for them. So fundamentally, one of the things that I desire all North Pointers to go through, I would recommend it to all followers of Jesus, is to be able to process some scripture every day, that we would have, and it doesn't need to be legalistic, like, oh, my word, I missed a day and God's mad at me. Not like that, but just, I feel like a fundamental discipline for a follower of Jesus is to be able to, if I'm going to be able to lead these principles in my life, I probably should read these principles. What did Jesus do? And so I think that we should have some type of Bible process, scripture implementation in our life, ideally on a daily basis. And so to be able to read scripture, not for information, but for application, would be helpful. So we've been doing this. Tell us a little kind of a summation of what did you think about your group? How did it go? What was that experience like for you? And then I'll do the same.
Ultimately, a good experience. The people that we had in that space are great people. And what was fun is you've got a ton of people from different backgrounds.
Okay.
You got a ton of people on different stages of the journey. So I think that part of it is my most favorite part, right?
Yeah.
I think there are also challenging elements to it too. I think that when you get into a room with that diverse of a journey, it is a little bit difficult to navigate those waters because you don't know like where people are coming from or how does this hit them or how does this. So there were some sessions that were just unreal, like so good. The conversation was great. And then there was other ones where you're like, oh, they're definitely not going to open up with this, right? It's very interesting to see who opened up, who didn't open up. You also don't want it to be a therapy session, right? Like there's just all of these things where you're walking through. But ultimately, at the end of that session, everyone was like, we should keep doing this.
Yeah.
It's like, we can hang out and we can do it in a different form, but that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to build community, to build your faith, to show you the way of Jesus and to help you do it together. So ultimately for us, it did that. And everybody in that space was like, it was great to meet X and Y. It was really cool to hear from them. So it was great. It really was a good experience. What about you?
Well, ours was great. So, matter of fact, as we're recording this, tomorrow we're finishing our group with a dinner. We're hosting a dinner at our house and just getting everyone together. And I was actually nervous about that because I'm like, I don't know if everyone's going to want to do that. And is that going to be weird? Because I don't want it to be like, hey, you could come to my house for dinner, but then everyone will be like, ooh, that seems weird. Because we've been meeting at a business. How ours started is we had someone, a North Pointer, who works at their place of employment, at their business. They said, hey, we got a couple North Pointers, but we want to invite it to people at our business. Let's do the group there. So we've been doing it there in a conference room. And then we've had some other people who weren't part of the business who just meet us there. It was actually a really cool setting and it made it easier for a lot of people to join. So we're doing it tomorrow and people are excited about getting the house for dinner. But we've had a great experience. Very similar is some have been in church all their life. Matter of fact, one of the guys in our group is a pastor's kid. So he was in church a lot growing up. And then we got people who are newer to the journey. And but it's been really cool because I think every week there's been things that everybody could apply and everybody could contribute to the conversation in a meaningful way. And I'm not one who feels super confident in leading a small group. I don't feel like I'm a naturally gifted facilitator. I'm much more comfortable if I'm just filling the room with words as opposed to fishing in the room for words. And so, because it's a whole different deal. It's a whole different dynamic. And, so I went in there a little bit nervous about, man, will I be able to help create an environment and will this be meaningful for people? And so Leanne and I have really enjoyed this journey. And for me, it's just been a great reminder that when you get scripture together and you try and make it as natural as possible to just, wherever you're at, how do you see this and how does this apply to your life? It's meaningful. People walk away and they're like, man, when so-and-so shares her experience, we're all interested because we're all interested in a story. And also, it's just great to be able to lean into the life of Jesus and be amazed. It seems more amazing as we all look at it together. So that's been kind of fun. One of the things, and I want to talk exercises and we'll hit some, so be thinking through that. But one of the things that we've talked about for a couple of years, the philosophy of community. I believe that we all should have community. We all should have Christian community if we're following Jesus. That doesn't necessarily mean we need to be in a North Point endorsed group, but we need to have some natural relationships that we bring intentional conversations to. So if we look at those two things, having intentional conversations and natural relationships, which in your life, how is that combo played out in your life? Is there one harder than the other, or?
I think that for me, intentional conversations have only been achievable through natural relationships. Okay. I think that when you're trying to have those intentional conversations in a forced setting, it's very awkward. It's very odd. If you have that natural relationship and you don't have intentional conversation, it's very non-life-giving and pretty just kind of surface. So to meld those two, I think that's what creates life within relationship.
Yeah.
So doing this, we definitely within the JXP group, not everyone knew each other, but we knew who was coming into that space. We had natural relationships with all of those people, but they didn't have relationships with anybody that was in that group other than us, right?
Yeah.
So at least there was some baseline for everybody in that space to have some type of natural relationship where they had some sense of safety, which I think gives the opportunity for those intentional relationships to happen, or intentional conversations. Because without it, I don't know if you can. I think it's a pretty weird, like, my name's Justin. What do you think about John 2? Like, it's just like a...
Now, some people love that stuff.
Right. I don't. So
Exactly.
So that's kind of how it's played out for us. What's that look like with you?
Well, I was thinking through the lens of, as you're sharing that, I'm like, man, a lot of people's church experience, that's what people want out of church. They'll say, hey, like, for example, at North Point, we should have more Bible studies. And while I'm not opposed to studying scripture, I want to do a Bible Dewey more than a Bible study, in the sense of, is if in the context of community, can we live out the principles of scripture? Do we need to have a Tuesday night class where we dissect the theology of whatever doctrine? That might be interesting, naturally interesting to some, but not to most. And so we realize if we just offer intentional conversation places, just classes, just places of Bible study, in a sterile environment like a church, it will be meaningful to some, especially who are informationally driven. But it's not an ongoing, meaningful to most. So to be able to say, okay, hey, a lot of these groups met in homes, or some who met in a church tried to make it feel less church-ish, by bringing in some food, music, whatever. Because if you can just develop an environment where we just connect, get to know each other, hang out a little bit, then, like you said, man, it's a lot more natural. So for me, the natural friendships come a lot easier than intentional conversations. Meaning, like, even as a parent, always thinking about how to be a good parent. And I've got a great relationship with my girls, and I feel like almost every season, as a general rule, I had a great relationship with the girls, but the intentional conversations always felt as a challenge for me. Like, okay, is there a tool I can bring to bedtime rituals? Is there a tool I can bring to family night? Leanne and I, great relationship. The intentional conversation piece, that's more challenging for me. And so, like, recently we're doing the adventure challenge. So,
what is that?
Adventure challenge is something I bought online. And it's 52 dates, and you buy a Polaroid camera and you go on like a scavenger hunt. Every date you scratch off like a lotto ticket. Do you play the lotto?
I don't.
You can't win if you don't play. Anyway, so you scratch it off like a lotto ticket. And so you say, okay, today's a date, and it'll tell you this date's going to take about this much time and cost about this much money, and you don't know what you're going to do. And so now you get ready, you set your date, now you scratch it off, and this is what we're doing. And then we take a picture of the activity at the end and put it in a book. So for us, that was, and what we like is, hey, we already like each other. Okay. we're kind of pot committed to this thing. So we got natural relationship, but this intentional conversation has been fun. So for me, I would say even my Christian friends, I got good Christian friends and good Christian community that I have natural relationships with, that if I had to bring something to the table, I know I can. But intentional conversations like JXP or a specific Bible study, that hasn't been my go-to. And I've always felt like, well, I don't really need that because I've got the natural relationships. Going through things like JXP reminds me both. When you bring intentional conversations and natural relationships, it really leverages it. If you could bring some natural relationships to your intentional conversations, it can make it more meaningful too.
That's great. You were talking about exercises, and
yes.
I want to know what's an exercise that you found helpful, and what is one that you never want to do again? Okay,
I never want to do crab walks. Okay,
Nope.
Not that kind of exercises? Have you?
Now,
those things, I cramp up like crazy bending that way.
Hamstrings?
Oh, man. Those things hanging by a thread, man.
Yeah, let me back up.
Okay.
Exercises within JXP.
Oh,
spiritual
gotcha.
exercises.
Okay. I was like, well, that was quite a shift, but that's
even
cool.
though I agree with you on crab walking.
Oh, mercy.
I mean, yes.
I rarely do that anymore.
I can't think of the last time I did.
No.
Spiritual exercises through JXP.
Yes.
One that you really liked, one that the group really kind of attached to, and some that you just didn't.
Okay, my favorite one that we did in JXP, and we had done this as a staff earlier, and so I was looking forward to it for the whole session, is where we crank some tunes, and you take a stack of like 3x5 cards, like 20 to 30 3x5 cards. And I'd recommend anybody to be able to do this. I think this would be meaningful. Get some time where you can just kind of think and process, create an atmosphere, and that could be as simple as just throwing on a worship song or whatnot, getting alone. And then you take a stack of 3x5 cards and just, we read, I don't remember if it was Luke 18, but we read a story about the blind Bartimaeus in Jericho, and how he called out for Jesus, and Jesus says, "What do you want me to do?" And then the exercise, so we read it, and then the exercise is, what do you want Jesus to do? And so then it was like, we have just some time to take our stacks, and the rules are you can't filter, just write it down. So I'm just bullet pointing, right? And then next card, next card, next card. And the first 4 is like rote answers, like, be a good man, right? Like, be a good father, right? This is what I want Jesus to do for me. I want, and they would be things that I would probably post about, right? But then by about card 6, card 7, as I keep flipping, I'm like, man, I'm pouring out my soul. Like, I'm like, my filter's down. And then so you just take some time, and what would I want Jesus to do? And I just write down, what would I want him specifically to do for my daughter, for my wife, for me? And I start writing these down, and then just processing this. And it made me emotional just looking at this, saying, man, this is what I really want from Jesus. Now, I'm putting them in categories, and then I'm like, man, this has been helpful for me. So it was a meaningful moment of about 20 minutes just to chill. But it's also, it became like a really meaningful, specific prayer list for me. Jesus, we've been talking about this, man, I really want to, and then thinking, how do I help in that? So that was my favorite exercise. I think anybody could do it, and I would encourage you to. What about you?
That was my least favorite.
It was?
Yeah.
Why?
I think it's the setting.
Okay.
We had kids outnumbered adults in our group.
Oh, okay.
So it was pretty crazy.
So you would have them all in your group? I mean, you just had them all.
We just had everybody at the house.
Yeah.
Right. So we had a lot of people there.
Okay.
And that specific week,
tougher to create an environment.
A little tougher to create an environment. So then we even go outside and we try to, but they're like climbing trees. Like they're just
the adults.
Right. Yeah. And the kids were getting mad because we're taking all the trees.
Yeah.
It was horrible. But I don't think that we had the necessary environment and space for that to actually cultivate something like that.
Yeah.
What's crazy is some of them that I thought, oh, this isn't going to be great, were actually the most impactful.
Really?
So we did a Lectio Divina where you reread it, right?
3 times.
3 times. And you're looking at different aspects of it each time, right? So what's it saying, like kind of a surface level, right? And then something kind of sticks out to you. What is that telling you to do? What kind of action do you take from that, right? So there's all of these different steps within this reading. And that one, we read When Jesus Calms the Storm. Right.
Okay.
And it was the most impactful for the group. Best conversation we had through the entire session, all of the sessions.
Really?
Yeah. And it's when he says, "Where's your faith?" And the question that came up was, how do you think he said that? Which told everyone in the room how you grew up religiously.
Oh, wow.
Is it him upset and mad? Where's your faith? Right? Or is it this like, hey, I got you. Where's your faith at? Because it's totally different. And everyone in the room had a different reading and interpretation of how he was saying that based upon how they grew up in the church.
Wow.
So just like floodgates opened of like just different conversations. It was the longest session we had by far because everybody just kept talking and kept telling stories and kept telling, oh yeah, this is what this meant. This is what this meant to me. It was awesome. And I would think like going through, I'm like, well, this isn't going to be a good one. Like I want to do the card one. That's the one I want to do.
Yeah.
Because I had gone through it in staff and it had been so good.
Yeah.
yeah, and then that one didn't pop for us, right? So it's just interesting to see, like, you got to do them all, right? Just to see what happens within that group.
Yeah.
Something that didn't work for you. Anything that didn't work or that you felt was like, man, I don't know about that one.
You know, I'm bad. I cheat. So if I felt like I didn't like it, I would skip it and Google a different exercise. Am I allowed to say that?
Oh yeah, you are. Yes, you
I'm
are.
like, I just feel like that's going to come across lame or boring. And so I'm like, surely someone else has got a better exercise. So yeah. So no, all of ours were awesome.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
I mean, yeah. So part of it is like for me, even the Lectio Divina. Am I saying that right?
I think so.
Okay. I just read it. I rarely say it.
I don't.
But that's you look at the scripture and you read the same thing 3 times. For me, that's what I get nervous. That's funny, our styles there, because I get nervous. I'm like, I don't know that that's going to create enough conversation. And then the pressure is going to be on me to keep this thing going, which is not what this is about. So, but again, it goes to my insecurity. And I'm like, I don't know. Would we get some conversation going? Mm-hmm. But we would use elements of that exercise during several of the weeks. And it is just a great way to get conversation going around scripture and around application. So here's what I would encourage all North Pointers, all listeners to do is go through scripture, read scripture in nice chunks, like slowly. What does it say? Read it again. What do you feel? Read it again. What do you do? Right? And those 3 things, that'd be a great exercise. Or, here's an exercise that wasn't in there, but I just added for our group one week, is write a letter to you from God, which sounds weird. And I'm not trying to, I don't even mean this in a prophecy way. But you can just start by saying things you know are true because it's already in the Bible. So again, get alone, get in an environment, and so just start writing a letter. And I would say just put your name. So for me, it's Dear Jeremy, I love you. Now, I'm not making that up because it says that in scripture. He loves us, right? Before when you were in your mother's womb, I formed you, So I take any verse I know that could be a general principle that I've seen at Hobby Lobby or anything, and I make it personal. Dear Jeremy.
Live, laugh, love.
Right? Yeah, live, laugh, love. Right?
God.
Yeah.
God.
Gather.
And thankful. Jesus.
Side note. I wish I remember the punchline. I saw this funny Instagram account that has all the Hobby Lobby signs in the weirdest places in your house. Tag us, man. Let us know. That could be a fun game. But anyway, so you just write this letter and you just start saying things that are in scripture. And then whatever's in your gut, and the rule is, hey, don't edit it. Don't be, bashful. Just take over, just write it down and then read it. And at the end, if you're like, yeah, this seems like, yeah, there's no way this is true, toss it. No big deal, right? It's just a great evaluation of what would God say to you. But a lot of times when you get done, you read this, you're like, oh man, because what you're doing really in this is you're saying the things that are inside of you that you're wondering if are from God and maybe you're hoping are. And it's just a really cool way to get it out. And so,
that's cool.
Yeah. So, but I want scripture to be meaningful, a great way for us to get into it. And let's continue to develop natural relationships. And if you're working on that, maybe start bringing some intentional conversation to them. Right Now Media is a great tool. For those of you who have, you're parenting, bring some intentional conversations to your kiddos. If you're married, we got Right Now Media. Right Now Media, I would still say, is probably the most underused tool that can help us have those intentional conversations. Mm-hmm. So let's keep growing. You don't need to be in a North Point group to do it, though we do have some classes coming up. We have some master classes.
We do, yeah. So there was those just one-time events to where if you want to enter into a space, you don't want to go to someone's home, that hasn't been your kind of passion to show up at a stranger's house. We're going to give you a great environment to learn, whether it be about parenting, whether it be about marriage, whether it be about finances, whether it be about the Enneagram, all of these different topical pieces that we can tie scripture with and into, and how does that correlate with the Bible and what Jesus says, and how do we follow him in this way? And we just do it in a large group setting to where, man, hopefully we do form some natural relationships out of that intentional conversation.
Yeah. So some people might go to one of those master classes and say, that was cool. I know a little bit more about it. Great. Met some people, had some cool dessert.
That's right.
Some might be like, oh, and they're starting a small group on that topic. And I'm like, jazzed. I'm in.
Right.
Okay. So it is no pressure. Obviously, we'll always have a next step, but it's not like, man, if we can get you here, and then we, and we're not trying to replace. People are like, are you replacing now groups with master classes? No, we are going to try and create as many on-ramps, groups, classes, events, Bible studies, whatever it might be, we can do for people. Oh man. Yeah.
Do they crab walk in Zumba? I've never been to Zumba.
Yeah, on accident, I have. Yep. My hip. You know my hip, man.
I know.
Next thing I know, I'm on the floor backwards. It's crazy. So, but hey, we hope you're having a great week wherever you're listening to this. Dive into some scripture. Let it dive into you, and let's keep growing. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for listeners. See you on the flippity flip.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.